And we are...
So I'm Chadi, I'm the head of support at Custobar, and I'm also the chief deliverability officer. So this is one topic that I've been working with for quite a while now. And so hopefully we can deliver some insight about this.
Yeah, and I'm Aleksi Montonen, so I'm the head of business development for Custobar. So I do work a lot with existing customers, new customers, and then also partners across the map. But now if we begin, we promised few learning points for you for today. So let's go through them first.
Right. So we will find out the 4 key elements to good email deliverability. So we will try to introduce the whole concept and break it down to the main steps. We will learn also the basic rules of email deliverability. It's a word we're gonna bump on a few times. So we want to be able to know what are good practices, what are some concrete steps. So this was actually also the next step, the next point, know what steps to take in order to guarantee email deliverability. But as you will learn during this webinar, it's not set recipe for everybody, but there is some logic to it that we can all acquire together today. And also how to recognize poor email deliverability indicators and warning signs. So of course, in order to improve on it, you need to be able to identify the signs and be able to read your current deliverability.
Yeah, perfect. And then going forward a bit on the agenda. So the structure of this webinar, first we'll cover the basics. What is deliverability? For example, how is it different from the email delivered? Then basically the 4 main aspects which affect deliverability. And by the way, most of this information in a bit different form you can also find from our deliverability white paper.
Right. So this is already available for you to download if you have not done it yet. And it is quite complementary to this webinar. We will not cover the white paper directly in this webinar, so feel free to read it or read it again to discover a little bit more about this topic.
Yeah. And actually also SendGrid, so which is the email provider behind Custobar, sending all of the emails. They also have really brilliant content about deliverability. So if you're super interested, that might be something that you want to subscribe to their.
Exactly. So they're the email dispatcher for Custobar. They work also with big players like Uber and
Airbnb. Yeah.
So they always have some great insight and some interesting takes on those topics.
And then a concrete example of how you can check for the deliverability from your own metrics from Custobar.
The essential steps to take in order to have good deliverability. So we really tried to break it down to the most important steps you can take today already to start improving should you need to. Some concrete examples of what it looks like when you have maybe not so good deliverability, and then an example of great deliverability. We will recap, of course, all the points we covered, and we will finish with the Q&A. Hopefully we will have lots of time to answer all your questions, and also we have collected a few more if we don't have many questions.
So exactly, so during the webinar, if there's some questions that come up, write them to the chat or the Q&A, and we'll collect them and answer them in the end, or at least try to answer all of them. But then, Chadi, what is deliverability?
Okay, so what's important to understand is that deliverability is not the same thing as just an email delivery rate. So what we need to understand here is that it's a much broader term and a more complex animal. And what's important to understand here is that not all of the aspects can be managed by the email marketer or even by the recipients of the email. So a lot of it falls in that kind of blank space between the email being outbound and me receiving it, decided should I click it or should I delete it or report spam. So a lot of deliverability itself happens between those two moments. So this is something we will cover, but first we will break down a little bit what we mean by deliverability.
Yeah.
So let's say that you're now sending your email out of Custobar. You activated your campaign, and at this moment,
Or actually, all of these principles actually work in any other.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So for the duration of this webinar, we will consider it from the aspects of an email campaign. But of course, those are general guidelines and principles you can apply to any channel, and that should be kind of the core philosophy of how you approach outbound content in general. So. So let's say that your email is right about to be sent. So already there's one check that will be made for this deliverability. So is it the right email address? Are there typos? Is there something incorrect, or did the customer not want to give you their real email address themselves?
So this basically means that even before it goes to the ISP or the servers of the email provider,
exactly.
These are the things which happens before it goes into the loop of
absolutely
that
so
system.
Straight out of Custobar already, there might be already some blocks. Did we mark the customer? Well, I will go back to this, but is the email address receiving, or is the recipient receiving your emails? So is there some problems with the network being down? Is there some connection errors? Is the inbox full? So all of those already can start affecting the email deliverability even before we consider the delivery. Then Custobar itself will mark the recipients that are impossible to reach as a hard bounce. That is to say, we proactively note that this email address cannot be reached, cannot be contacted, and so to prevent damage to the IP reputation, we will already mark them as a do not send. So it's this hard bounce mark, which can be cleared in Custobar by updating the email address. So in those cases, it would make sense to maybe verify with the customer themselves in the store. Could you please confirm the email address, verify if you use another one. But so before the email is even coming out of Custobar, we will do a check already at the activation of the campaign that how many of those customers are already marked with a hard bounce. So now the email has not even left the servers, that already there are some filters and checks. Then if we go to the next step, so here is one more aspect of deliverability, but this one is already coming out of your control as a marketer. So this is where the IP reputation matters. Is the IP reputation poor, in which case already some internet service providers, so ISPs, will start to throttle your content, maybe redirect it directly to their own limbo, which is even before it reaches the spam folder, the email might not even make it all the way to that box. Is the traffic too heavy to handle? Do you have just too much going out, or is the receiving network receiving too many requests at that specific time, which can happen during high traffic times like Black Friday,
maybe Christmas period,
exactly.
Yeah.
So those are moments where the traffic can be too heavy to handle. So some emails will be deferred. This is something, unfortunately, that will happen. In many circumstances, an email gets deferred 4 to 5 times before it's delivered. So that can happen in any moment. It can be just that 2 requests are coming in with the same timestamps, or it can be that the traffic is too heavy. And if an email is deferred too long, so SendGrid will keep trying actually for 48 to 72 hours to try to deliver the message. So this is why we can have 4 to 5 deferred email and still not count it as a soft bounce, but it can be so that we keep trying, and after a while, either we will stop trying and consider that the email was dropped, or in the case of a high traffic moment, it can be that the amount of deferrals accepted will be lowered for a temporary moment, so that's after 2 or 3 attempts already the email is dropped and will not be delivered. So this is factors that we cannot necessarily control, but that are good to work around. And then, of course, from, again, a server point of view, if this is a company email, like a corporate email or a city or a .edu university email domain, it could be that themselves have hard rules to block commercial traffic. So it could be that the email address is correct, the servers are just fully open, ready to receive requests, but just identifying the provenance could already throttle the traffic, as we don't accept that type of email in those inboxes because they're forward or things like that. If we move on to the next step.
So basically this, like, now it was a block, so then we go to the next stage.
Exactly, let's assume that all of that is clear, we just keep going. Now is where we actually look at spam traps, so-called.
So basically this means, like, if the email is going to your inbox or if it's going to the spam
Yeah, so not the spam folder of your inbox, but the spam trap before even that step. So here is where we can have an unlimited amount of red flags and spam activating aspects to the email. So what words are you using? Are there some keywords that are a no-go? What behavior did you have in the past?
For example, buy Viagra.
Yeah, exactly.
-70%.
So it could be that this word only, the Viagra itself, is a red flag, and the domain provider will block it right away. So it can be adult content, but it can be also gambling, things like that. So those can be just hard cuts directly, but it can be also the behavior itself from the sender triggers some flags. So have you sent the same email 17 times in the last hour? Like, the email might be legitimate, but this type of behavior could trigger a spam trap. Are there too many links in the email address, in the email content? Are there only images and no text? Is it this type of content where nothing loads ever and all the links are broken? So what's interesting about this is, according to a study in 2019 with some email recipients like you and I were polled, what was found is that there are basically two types of spam emails according to the perception of the recipients. The first type is the malicious, offensive content. So like you said, maybe the Viagra example is a good one. It's not relevant to them. They don't know why they gotten that. Probably their email was captured somewhere and used in a not so honest way. And then the second type is commercial so-called spam. This is legitimate senders, brands that I interact with, but that the user finds is not relevant to them, is annoying them. They did not agree to sign up to a newsletter, but still receive some content, or they unsubscribed in the past and still receive some emails. Or it can be just that the customer is not very interested, even though they subscribed to the newsletter, they just wanted the 10% discount that went with it and were not interested in opening the email letter. And what this study found is that recipients of emails are much, much likelier to report, unsubscribe, or block the second type than the first.
And that has a lot to do with the actual, I think, the using of mobile, because in your phones you can super easily swipe it to left or right.
Exactly.
Just archive it or delete the message.
Yeah.
Which actually solves the problem in the short term.
Yeah. So there were two aspects of it. One was that users were quite afraid to touch the offensive, malicious content at all. They don't want to deal with it. They're afraid to click a link. For example, an unsubscribe link could be a trap to, so they don't deal with those. Typically, they just delete them and leave them be. However, if it's commercial so-called spam, they're much likelier to open it, unsubscribe, report as spam, delete, block sender, all of those actions. And as you said, now it's made so easy that you can have rules like swipe left will block the sender, swipe right will delete, and things like that. So customers or recipients are much, much likelier to be violent and harsh with the commercial spam because it's non-threatening. Yeah. So this is something to keep in mind when we are reaching that inbox, when we are just on the verge of reaching it, that there are several aspects that unfortunately we cannot control as marketers ourselves.
And then the last point.
And so the last point is when the email is actually finally visible on your mobile or in my inbox. And this is where we will see, again, this behavior. Will the customer open it? Will they click it? Would they forward it to a separate email address? Would they instead delete it without opening? Would they report it as spam? All of that can be affected directly by the marketer with two key elements, which are the content relevancy, extremely important, and the frequency of sending. Those are the two key factors that we can control as marketers, and that should be at the core of the philosophy of the campaign as a whole. Is the content relevant? Is the timing right? Is it too often, too frequent? Is the content too broad? This is where it will make a lot of sense to start sitting down, take a piece of paper, and start to strategize.
Yeah. And maybe also from this context, because these things actually affect the deliverability a lot. So
Absolutely.
how do the receivers, what kind of action they take with the messages they get, or if they take any? And maybe taking up the example of the Viagra. For example, if I would get Viagra emails from, let's say, a pharmacy, and I would actually need them, I would always click through them, go to the website and buy them. Then actually the email inbox or the email provider knows that even though that these would normally maybe be blocked or would go to spam, but actually for Alexei, this is the important stuff, and that would actually then end in my actual inbox.
Absolutely. And similarly, legitimate content from my bank that I subscribe to and that would be relevant to me because it's legitimate can be, completely uninteresting, unappealing to me. And by deleting it every time I receive it and just
without opening,
never engaging with the content, it could be that perfectly legitimate email would go straight to my spam folder or even stop reaching me entirely just based on my own behavior itself. And this is not on the part of the bank. This is not because of the content or because of any structural issues with the network, but just because I can't be bothered with reading it.
It's basically from the interaction between you and the brand or company.
No matter how sophisticated the algorithm will be, ultimately the customer behavior will completely override any rules that might be in place. Just like you said, if Viagra is relevant to you when you click it open, ultimately it will start to reach your inbox every time it's sent. Similarly, my bank might be wondering, why doesn't he pay his bills and how come he never reads his email? It's because even though the email is perfectly legit, I can't be bothered with it.
Exactly. It's a good example of Chadi's finances and my interests.
Now we all know.
Yeah.
So all of those different angles and aspects we discussed are all the steps that will make deliverability. And as you can see, there's many steps in between the actual mail sending and the delivery, and those steps are also part of this deliverability. Most of these steps are out of our control. As email senders, as mass marketers, a lot of this is just, we cannot affect it whatsoever. However, it's very important to understand that there is a clear frame, and there are rules and logics that create those clear boundaries within which we will learn to work, and also maybe try to find best practice that work for ourselves. So it might be that there's no magical recipe that works for everybody, but we know that at least this frame is clear, and in this defined frame, we can find out what works best for ourselves.
Perfect. And then I think this is super interesting. What are the 4 aspects that do affect deliverability?
So first of all, it's the subscriber engagement. So as we discussed, the key elements, and I'm going to really try to hammer this point, is the relevancy of the content and the frequency of the sending. Customer engagement, subscriber engagement is really the core of what you can affect as marketer and what you should be focused on. So from Custobar point of view, there's many ways you can affect that, but ultimately it's all about your own knowledge. You as marketers have an idea about your brand, about your customers, and this is where it's important to, while still keeping deliverability in mind, to understand that what makes sense for the subscribers, what content is the most successful based on your past experiences, and what are your best guesses and predictions for the future content.
Yeah. And I think also a good point about the kind of like the engagement and the relevancy for the customer was that something that the customer first thought that was relevant when they got the first emails might not, if you always send the same kind of messages, after 2 years it might not be something that they actually engage with.
Absolutely.
So also they're kind of like, maybe like in all marketing, finding out the new things and ways of communicating to them keeps it fresh.
So creativity is key. If it's always the same newsletter with product description, it might get repetitive. But if something grabs my attention, maybe instead of receiving a special offer, I would get instead some tips and tricks about how to use my current outfits but make it look better. Or instead of receiving the usual lists of car parts, I received some interview about this great driver. I might be more interested, more likely to click that mail open and actually read the content and click through the links. So this is also something that we tend to forget is that as much as we try to processize and automate everything, have clear drag and drop guidelines for every single email, ultimately content should be something that is interesting, and the form in which it comes is as important as the actual content.
So actually it's pretty common sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So in the end, kind of like as long as you think that this, like you honestly believe that this content is relevant for the customer, that's already quite a big step towards good deliverability.
Absolutely. Then the subscriber's lifecycle management. So you were kind of touching on that when you talked about the content at the beginning might not be the same content that would interest me today. But what's important to understand is that there are many things to tackle in the customer lifecycle on top of their own interest. For example, do you have a welcome automation in place that could help you already verify the email address of the customers that you brought into Custobar? So let's say that I subscribe in the store to the loyal customer program. Is there any check, any double opt-ins, or any system in place to verify that I did not put a typo in my email, for example?
So basically having an email like welcome automation right away coming to the inbox, and there would be a typo, it would be a hard block, right?
Exactly.
So then it would be excluded from future sending.
So already we filtered this email out, and we'll have these hard bounce only once, and there will not be any problems in the future. But also, let's assume that I did provide the right email address, and I do open this email. So already we can see that this is an inbox that I do check, and not just one of those trash bin inboxes that some people use. And the Custobar cookie will then be installed on my device, so that I will be able to see in Custobar all the browsers that I made, all my activity on the website, thanks to the Custobar script. So this cookie is very important.
So basically having a good kind of like action there, which leads back to the provider's web page.
Absolutely.
Is super important.
Yes. So ultimately, you need to have some sort of call to action. It's great to have a great welcome message, but there should be something that makes me click through a button or a link. Passive customers filtering. This is very important in the lifecycle management. We put a threshold at 180 days, 6 months. The reason for that is Outlook did some quite thorough testings and verifications, and they found out, in their own words, contacting a customer who has been passive for 6 months or more is the kiss of death to your IP reputation.
So basically this means that like everyone should be excluded from the emails who hasn't or who haven't opened or clicked your email during that period of time.
Absolutely. So in Custobar, the way we define an active customer is based on their entire behavior. So if they have browsed something, if they have purchased something, if they registered or signed up to a newsletter list, all of those are considered activities. But in the case of this deliverability webinar, it's only from email reactions. So have they clicked or opened a mail within 180 days? If so, they can be part of your audience. If they have not, then they need to be excluded.
So basically having that as a kind of like exclusion.
Yeah, so I would have it as an exclusion block and use that in all my outbound communication. Unless I'm trying to specifically try to re-engage passive customers, maybe with a win-back automation or something like that, I would systematically exclude anyone who have not clicked or opened an email in the last 6 months.
That's a really good and like actionable point.
Exactly. And one step, which would be kind of the final step in this lifecycle management, is the unsubscription. It's very, very crucial to have it easy for the customer to unsubscribe. The reason for that is based on some studies that were made. Customers who find it hard to unsubscribe from an email address, maybe there's too many hoops to jump through, or maybe it's just unclear, have they unsubscribed for just a mailing list or from the whole program, they are much likelier to report it as spam should they receive any communication after that, even if they did not do the steps right themselves. It is not the responsibility of the customer to make sure they unsubscribe thoroughly. It should be our responsibility to make sure we don't contact someone who does not want to be contacted. And even though we see an unsubscribe as kind of a defeat, it's very crucial to understand that a spam report is much more harmful than an unsubscribe. So if a customer tells me I'm not interested in your content, I will say, great, thank you for your business, and hopefully you'll keep purchasing our products even without receiving the emails or the SMSs. But if I keep trying to contact them, their relationship to the brand might get damaged, and the IP reputation will be hurt real bad if spam reports start to come through. Finally, I think we can jump another because we're in point 3. The technical infrastructure. So this is a bit more about the domain white labeling, the IP warm-up, which are steps we take care of in Custobar internally, but also the bounce management, which is very important. In Custobar, you can use the field blockit_email and a value from 2 to 5 to filter out customers who have had soft bounces, hard bounces, invalid email address, spam reports. So all those different bounce values can give you a specific segment of customers who, for one reason or another, we were not able to deliver the email to. It's very important to keep a close eye on these figures to know where do you stand in general in terms of those soft bounces, hard bounces, because this will allow you to then have maybe a campaign of email verification in store. When customers come in the store, we could check from the Custobar interface, is your email address reaching through? Do we have problem with that? In which case, maybe ask for a separate one. No. And also, it's important in terms of those older ISPs. So there exist some older domain providers.
For example, in Finland, maybe Suomi 24 would have been one,
so
which is now
it's been deprecated. Yes, they have closed their servers, but there exist some more like local. I believe in Germany, the tonline.de is a known offender. So there exist those smaller domain providers that still have running servers, but never really upgraded because it's not really an interesting business model. But at the same time, they will not necessarily shut down like Suomi 24 did. But it could be that their servers cannot handle a lot of traffic. These inboxes are typically older with older owners, so they don't check their email as frequently as you and I would do on our phone. So all of those reasons can make it so that those old ISPs can tend to be blockers themselves. So also the algorithm they use are usually very primitive.
Exactly. It's not as high end, for example, as with Outlook or Gmail.
Absolutely. So they're a lot likelier to block you a bit too much rather than not enough. Because
but what would be then be a way of working with these kind of like smaller ISPs?
Exactly. So there are 2 ways that I can think of. The first one is to have a physical campaign of, is this email correct, or do you use something maybe more recent, like an Outlook or Gmail email address for your newsletters? And of course, in Custobar directly, some solution you can implement today is use the domain search as a search block to exclude, for example, luuku.fi or tonline.de. And this will give you all the email addresses that end with @tonline.de. So this domain search can be, again, one exclusion block that you will remove from your sending. So let's say you send a newsletter tomorrow, you could send it to everyone except those people, and then do a separate sending for them, where you would maybe throttle the outbound quantities, or the traffic would be kind of throttled to try to not saturate their servers. So one way to go about that is maybe to use the A/B test functionality of Custobar, which can be also ABCD, so break it down in 4 groups. That would be a good way to have maybe 500 recipients broken into even smaller subgroups that I will then contact over the course of 4 days.
So basically, like here, if I would, for example, see that the delivery of my messages wouldn't be that good, first thing could be that you check those customers who have these smaller email domains, and then take this kind of action for those, right?
Exactly. So again, it's important to understand that deliverability is not just delivery. And so this activity with those smaller internet service providers could and will negatively impact your activity with the larger ones.
Yeah, so by they exchange information.
Yes, they exchange information. Spam filters tend to work across different servers. So it's important to understand that by isolating those recipients and maybe sending smaller amounts of email, we can try to, in echo to that activity, try to have higher delivery rates for the more active customers, for the Gmail and Outlook accounts, have great stats. that will in return show that your content is relevant to most users. So surely to those guys as well, it should be pretty relevant. It might go through a bit more. So there are some steps to implement. Now let's talk maybe about how to check concretely deliverability as a day-to-day Custobar task.
Yeah.
So if you look at campaign stats, and this is a real campaign that we have taken from one of our Custobar users. So we can see already from this that there are some red flags that good Custobar users could be able to identify. So again, deliverability is not the same as delivery, but we can see here from the delivery rate already one red flag. This rate is too low in my opinion.
So 91.5%.
91%. It looks great, right? But what I know is that this delivery rate is directly echoed in parallel by the bounce rate, which is here 8.5%. This is way too high. So already from this, I can tell that there's going to be some problems in the future, and those bounces should be managed.
So it means that then there's so many soft bounces and hard bounces,
Exactly.
which lowers the delivery rate.
Absolutely.
Which means that this will actually affect your reputation as a sender.
Exactly.
Going
so
forward.
The IP reputation will suffer from this, and even though those 319 hard bounces will not be contacted again by Custobar, the 406 soft bounces coauld be reattempted in future campaigns. So already here I can tell that there's some issues. Now, if we look at the webinar white paper, we had given some breakdown of statistics for poor deliverability, medium deliverability, and optimum deliverability. So let's look at the optimum rate. If I look at the open rate, I would be aiming for over 25%. So this 7.8% also is a red flag to me. I think this content might not have been very relevant to the users. The click rate should be over 5%, and now we don't even reach 1%. So clearly the call to action was not powerful, it was not relevant, or maybe there was no call to action at all. Maybe it was just a banner that customers clicked by accident or on purpose. And then finally, the bounce rate. It should be less than 1.5%. So now with 8%, we're way higher. So even though this campaign is not a disaster on its own, because the conversion rate was quite good at 2%, we can already see from those red flags that something is wrong either with the content, with the customers, their profiles in Custobar, or a combination of two.
Yeah.
If this was my 5th campaign for the day, I would probably call it quits. But if it's the first sending that I've done in Custobar this week, I would seriously have a look at what was the audience, what were the customers like, and what was the content.
Yeah. What about then when we talk about good deliverability?
So let's say that we follow all the steps that we're discussing today. What we could reach is the next example. Now, if you look at this, you should be able to already identify one problem with this campaign, even though it looks amazing, is that the audience is 100,000 customers. So this indicates to me that this was a mass sending newsletter, which is something I don't advocate.
Or then maybe they have a huge customer base.
It could be, but yeah.
Yeah, in this case, we know that it's
exactly.
It was basically a bulk sending.
It was a bulk sending. But what's great here is that we can see that the delivery rate is 99.9%. With an audience of 100,000 customers. That's quite the feat.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The open rate is already 46.1%, which is quite amazing. The click rate is also quite high. So what I think this campaign shows is that with the right content and also a great knowledge of your customer base, because I can tell you that this customer has a very engaged customership. Their customers really like the brands, they like the brand identity, they like the product. This is the type of deliverability rate that you can see. Not only the delivery rate, but everything across the board, from past sending to future sendings, from engagement, conversion, open rate, everything makes sense.
And wasn't it so that actually this customer, because knowing the background, they actually had worked quite a lot with the bounces and actually with the deliverability before?
Absolutely.
So now they're basically collecting the fruits of that work.
Exactly. So they spent quite some time working on bounce management. They have been verifying email addresses. They have been working on isolating the bad domain providers, and they have been working actively in trying to keep up with customer base in terms of address changes, email address changes. Is that email address the right recipient, or was it forwarded maybe to a spouse or a partner? So by keeping track of all those things, which we can do on a day-to-day basis in store, they then get the benefit of those great stats.
That's amazing. Then bit of recap of the steps for good deliverability.
Sure. So again, let's hammer it one more time.
Yeah.
The right content, relevancy and frequency. Those should be two keywords that you will remember after this webinar for a while. Relevancy and frequency. The right audience. So this is the second aspect, which we discussed a little bit with our example before. It is very important to understand your brand, your products, your brand identity, but it's also extremely important to understand your customer base. For some of our Custobar users, brand category filtering, for example, makes a lot of sense. If you have browsed this product category, here are some recommendations, here are some products, here are some discounts that make sense.
For example, I've been buying dog food.
Exactly.
Then it makes sense that when the new dog food comes or there's discount on dog equipment, I'm most likely interested, right?
That's great. But then for other customers, this can be so broad that it would make no sense. Was it a senior dog? Was it a puppy? You have different brands. You have the premium dog food. You have the low-cost dog food. So maybe the product category is the wrong filter.
Yeah.
But only you can know that as a marketer, and you need to be able to put together the right content and the right audience. And this is one of the core values of Custobar, is to get all that data and all that information at your fingertips, so you can implement it best based on your needs.
Yeah. So in the end, this is also one thing that it's not actually that complicated.
Or
like
common
way,
sense,
yeah,
right?
It's common sense that message people about the things that they're most likely interested in. Of
Right.
course, you can't ever know, but basically you can increase the odds.
Exactly. I can have the best email content whatsoever, but if I just fire it in bulk to all my recipients, I'm missing out. Like, why would I send my dog food discounts to someone who doesn't own the dog and I know it? So there should be at least some sort of segmentation logic there. Easy to get out. Again, the unsubscribe should be as smooth and easy as possible. We do not want to hold customers hostage.
Or then, for example, having these kind of like my preferences, marketing preferences
Yes.
in the e-commerce site.
It should always be so that the unsubscribe button is clearly labeled, clearly visible, maybe in the content, maybe in my footer, just click here to unsubscribe. And after that, we can manage. Do you want to just change your preferences? Do you want to give a reason why you unsubscribe? All of that can be done.
Yeah.
But it should be clear for the customer that there is a way out. So maybe they will actually stay.
Yeah.
Nothing happens in a vacuum. That's also very important. When I send my email, it's not just me sending one line of code to your server. There's so much going on. What have I done in the past? What am I doing at the same time? What will I do tomorrow? All of this matters to that one email coming out. And what's important to understand is that it all makes sense as a whole. So if I pull that string over here, it might move over there. And that's why I need to keep track of the whole situation. I need to think logically and implement those steps across the board. If my email is going out to this great customer who is engaging a lot, this good behavior is going to reflect on maybe that customer I could not reach yesterday. And just the same way, you need to think for yourself. Does it make sense to send one newsletter for the dog food enthusiasts today? Or should I have rather an automation running in the background for all dog food enthusiasts? Every time I see a browsed event for dog food category, those customers get added to my automation audience to receive a newsletter monthly or something like that, but just that one email coming out. So let's say I have 10,000 dog food enthusiasts. I can send a campaign to 10,000 customers and receive 50% delivery rate and 5% open rate. Or I can send an automation that will send 10,000 emails, out of which 5,000 of those automation emails will get 100% open rate because it's just one recipient at a time. And 5,000 times 100% open rate will look a lot better than this one time 50% open rate. Even though the audience was the same, you have to do that balance.
No.
And finally, monitoring is key. It is extremely important that all that data, all that information, those stats that you receive, don't just fall into a trash bin and never get looked at. You need to go into your Custobar account, have a look at your campaign. How did they perform? Because it is not enough to know what deliverability is if you don't look at what is my deliverability. How can I improve it? What are the angles I should work on? So it's very important to monitor and then take actions.
And I think it was well said. I think it was in the SendGrid report, and I think most people say that email deliverability is kind of like a brand that it takes time to build it, and it's really easily lost.
Absolutely.
So that's why it needs methodological work.
Absolutely.
to keep it up.
Absolutely. And it's also this kind of philosophy to keep in the back of the mind of all the actions I take. Does it make sense in terms of deliverability? Will it impact it negatively? So should I reconsider?
Exactly. And also because like the email marketing, like the rules there, or like the basics of email marketing, those are things which are not relevant in any other marketing channel actually. So basically, I think also here that kind of like thinking about email marketing in the same way as you think about other forms of marketing doesn't work.
Absolutely.
So basically, you have to follow the rule book of
exactly.
Marketing.
We have this frame inside of which we can operate as we please, but the frame is here to stay.
Exactly. We only have 2 minutes left. Should we skip to the summary or?
I think we can just have a quick look at this one. So those words that you might see on the screen right now, the link between all of those words is those were 2019 main offenders for spam traps. And you can see that there's some very simple words such as costs, 50% off, discount. All of those can be used, but context is key. If you use them, avoid just bland subject line, 50% off, hot deals, big discount. You need to be able to provide some context, and this creative subject line will help you in 2 ways. Number one, if I say 50% off on car parts over this winter, this already gives enough context where the algorithm can check. Am I a parts dealership? Is it the winter? Based on that already, they can see that this is maybe not spam, but this is actually targeted, relevant content. Finally, this will get me more likely an open because the physical human there sitting behind their screen, they might see that, okay, hey, I have a car and it is winter. Maybe I should check that email.
So actually, once again, it's about common sense. If the subject line makes you as an individual think about opening and seeing what is it about, it's much better than just like a general free delivery, 50% off cheap deals.
Exactly. So ultimately, it doesn't matter how sophisticated the algorithm is, a human reader should be able to say, this is interesting to me. And if it's not interesting to a human, more likely a machine will also consider it spam.
Yeah.
And so let's go through the key takeaways. So deliverability means it does not mean only whether or not the email makes it to the inbox, but it's a lot more complex than just delivery rate. It's all those factors we discussed. Some you can affect, some you cannot. And this is why it's important to work on those you can affect. Good deliverability requires constant work. As you were saying, it's like building a brand. You need to work on it all the time and make sure that you don't, on a mistake, undo all the work you have done. So,
but also, I think a good point here is that if at some point of time you have bad deliverability, even after you've gone down that hole, even after that, by working systematically, you can still build up your reputation back.
Yeah, you can only improve from there.
Yeah.
And it's quite steady work, but it will work out. So the ways to maintain that good sender reputation is be relevant, send segmented messages, use automations, personalize content, segment your customer base, know them, know their interests, know their behavior, observe the past behavior, and predict future behavior based on those. This is important to do. Next step is avoid the kiss of death. If you remember, exclude inactive subscriber in all circumstances. If you have to, you will contact them separately, but in the meantime, remember to try to exclude those inactive subscribers. This will help your delivery rate a lot and your deliverability as a whole.
Yeah.
and make unsubscribing easy. This is the final step. It's very important that the customer feels safe in your hands and they don't feel hostage.
Perfect. Great. So hopefully all of these points were helpful for you and you got new ideas or interesting information here. Now let's go to the questions. Yeah, and actually there's also, we'll also actually send the link to you about the white paper. So you can also read the deliverability white paper later. But now we go to questions and we got a few of them apparently.
So the question is, would it be good if I send my emails to those who have reacted in one way or another to my emails within 3 months? Okay, yeah. So yeah, absolutely, it's great. It's absolutely great if you, instead of excluding only the inactive customer, if you target actively those engaged customers, it's great. But what you want to avoid is force those customers into the passive category. You don't want to push them away by preventing them from engaging with your content. So if you have some maybe more generic content like a newsletter or something, you could proactively target only those active customers in the last months or 3 months. But I would also want to give everyone a chance to click or open. So if you try to be too strict in your restriction, what you're going to do is, by having time spent during which the customer is not receiving anything, you will slowly push them back into the passive customer group. So I think it's important to understand that you want to keep a chance for everyone to engage. And it can be something as simple as having a win-back automation. If a customer has been passive for 4 or 5 months, they receive a little reminder that, hello, we're still here for you. Is there something we can interest you in? Custobar is a great recommendation tool that can provide products that are calculated individually. So something like that can be a great way to get a customer back into your website, but also your pool of active customers.
Exactly, to have like dynamic content there. Then also we had an interesting question which came in beforehand. It was about the Gmail promotions tab.
Right.
So there the question was, because I know that some people don't want to be in the Gmail promotions tab, but here was the question: how do I get in to the Gmail promotions tab?
Yeah.
Do you have an idea about this? Because at least like what we know about it and what we read about it, it's there's basically two sides, because some people want to get rid of it to only be in the inbox. And some people want to go to the promotions tab. Just quick facts about it was that this was in the States, but still, so 45% of people check the promotions tab daily, and 70% check it weekly. Exactly. I checked my Gmail promotions tab. The interesting part there is that actually all the things which go to the promotions tab are also in my inbox.
Exactly.
Which in turn means that, which is actually also how the promotion tab works in many cases, is that if they see that it's basically promotional material, so it's from your brand about newsletters or offers, Gmail already knows that, okay, this is promotional material.
Absolutely.
But then that I engage with them, I click it, I open it.
It will slowly be pushed towards your main box over time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's important to understand is that maybe we need to think outside of the tabs and think about the deliverability as a whole. But in that specific context, if you want to be in the promotion tab, just keep your content as it is. And ultimately, the algorithm learns that this is commercial content. On the other hand, if you wanted to be out of it, you would need to strip your content from any brand, any branding, basically. So no name, no logo, anything that's
no links to your site,
no links to the site, anything that's basically identifying your content, which in turn will make the mail look so spammy that I would really not advocate this. So
exactly, and then at the same time, most likely nobody would actually buy from it or be engaged with it because it looks
exactly.
Like
that's the risk. I mean, if the email does not look good, if I cannot tell who is even sending that, chances are I will just delete it, not even read it. On the other hand, what's important to understand is that based on at least Google's self-reporting and their studies, the engagement is not lowered in the promotion tab. What they have found is that most users who were polled found that the accuracy of the promotion tab sorting was very high. So while they might wonder, why is this in my promotion tab, not in my inbox? Most users understand, well, it's because it's a newsletter from that one brand that I like. So it is in the sense of promotion. But as long as the engagement rates and 70% of users do check it weekly, as long as this rate remains high, we can think outside tabs and not really worry about that.
Yeah, because in the end, as long as the messages are relevant,
Exactly.
It doesn't matter in which tab it is, because most people check both. As long as your messages don't go to spam or get blocked in total,
Absolutely, yeah.
then you are there for the customer to engage with and check it out in any case.
And as you said in the beginning, if you engage with it, click it, open it regularly, slowly it will move on to your regular inbox, and this will be a non-issue.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't have any more questions.
So let's take maybe
one
from what we received beforehand. So what was a question I received in the support channel of Custobar? And it was about SMS deliverability. How do I optimize my SMS deliverability? So basically, SMS is its own separate animal, and we might do a webinar about that in the future. Actually, I think that would be an interesting topic. But what is key to understand is that the same rules apply. Everything that we said about emails makes also a lot of sense about SMSs. Segmentation, relevancy, frequency, easy to unsubscribe, all of those key points apply across all channels. It's important to understand that ultimately those are these common sense guidelines that they can be applied to any channel. It just works for everything.
Exactly, and maybe in the SMS case, the algorithms and systems for the SMS inboxes or your phones, it's not the same kind of methods there.
That's right. Yeah. So you're most less likely to trigger a spam trap with an SMS than with an email. However, you have a lot more structural issues in terms of connections, country extensions, all of that, which is more something you can address beforehand, before the campaign is even drafted. But these are things that we can discuss, I think, in another webinar.
Absolutely. And then we had the question about basically the smaller ISPs. So, for example, Lucas and T-Mobile. But I think you already answered it. So, basically, if you see that you get a lot of, for example, blocks,
soft bounces,
hard bounces, then it's something that you can look into. That are they coming from specific email domains, for example, let's say Luku, and then start putting those sendings into pieces and send them bit by bit.
Exactly. So I would isolate those domains that are causing an issue, separate them from my general sendings, my newsletters, or my segmented campaigns even. And I would try to contact them either as a piecemeal campaign running over time. One way to do it would be to use A/B testing to break it down, or even an automation that every time a certain criteria happen, that customer would receive the same newsletters, but as an automated email to contact them one by one instead of in groups. So this will help me kind of mitigate that traffic volume issue, and at the same time keep my general deliverability rate quite high without affecting my IP reputation too much. One more thing to do, of course, is to check into your own Custobar account, check the events page and look at the event type mail block. Try to see is there a pattern coming up? Is it specific mail domains causing issues? All of that. It's all about monitoring. And if you have questions about how to do that, how to find that information, send us an email in support, and we will help you find steps that you can implement to monitor your bounces.
Yeah. And actually, something that I didn't write down as a question, but I think it just now popped up from previous discussions, was the activating passive subscribers. And then the question was that, should I send one bulk to everybody who hasn't been active in the last 6 months? Or should I have an automation there, which basically, like you said, trickles the messages one by one?
So I think it's always better to automate everything you can automate, because first of all, the less time you spend on that, the more you can spend on segmenting and sending your campaigns day to day. but also because, again, one open would be 100% open rates. So in that sense, it would really help you with your reputation. However, what's important to understand is that sometimes having a yearly campaign of are you still alive type of email, like do you wish to still receive content from us, yes or no, and cleaning that customer from the database can help you, first of all, improve your deliverability, but also from a pretty simple wallet point of view. Removing contacts from Custobar is going to save you money. Removing recipients from your campaign is going to reduce your email traffic, so it's going to save you money. So there's always those steps you can do that by culling those kind of bad profiles, bad emails, you will ultimately save yourself some effort, some money, and improve the delivery.
And actually, that you can do even if you have the automations running. That every once a year,
exactly.
every half month.
Yeah, you can just do an audience of customers who have not opened that one automation or any automation or any email in a certain amount of time. Mark those to be deleted and then delete them.
Yeah, because that was a good point, which I read, that if somebody hasn't, for example, opened or clicked your messages in the last year, yes, how likely it is that they will
That's a good
they will click it now if you just said, like, are you dead or are you still there?
Absolutely. Of course, you can always keep this customer profile for database historicity reason, if you want to keep the sales, all of that. But chances are, if they have not engaged with your content for a year, they might have not purchased anything in a long time either, and might not be relevant to keep as a customer profile, because all of this will affect, of course, your future campaigns, your future product recommendation calculations. So it's good to keep also your database up to date.
Exactly. And of course, in that case, for example, if you have a lot of that kind of inactive old customers, maybe then you can send them a letter asking that.
Physical mail, absolutely.
Exactly. Come and register to the web shop or come to the closest store and update your information, and you get something, for example.
Yeah, I think that could be a good final point, because we're reaching the hour and we can wrap this up. But this whole webinar was made from the single point of view of email campaigns, but it's important to understand that what does not work for a specific customer, if they don't click my emails open, maybe it's because they're an SMS type of customer. So it's good to also try and see what works best, and then tailor your audiences accordingly. If my customer never opened my email but opens every single SMS, maybe I should mark it as such and only SMS.
No, that's a good point. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining today. Hope you found this webinar interesting. Send us feedback.
Hopefully you learned something that you can implement right away to improve your own deliverability. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or if you want to know more about this, you can contact me at support@custobar.com. We will have the white paper link for you available soon. Actually, it's already available.
Yeah, but
we will send it to you.
Exactly, with the webinar recording.
And yeah, I mean, if you have any questions, contact us, and hopefully we can help you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great week. One chat. Thanks, dudes. You are welcome. This is the